We knew that we wanted to make some big changes to the garden before we even bought the house, but when it came to starting the work, we were a little hesitant. The previous owner had spent a lot of time getting the garden exactly how she wanted it, and something inside us was telling us that it might be a bit disrespectful to make such big changes to the garden so soon after moving in. But at the same time, we knew that the longer we waited to do the work, the less time we would have growing food in our own garden. And to add a sense of urgency, spring was already in full flow, bulbs were already flowering in the long grass, and the cherries were starting to drop their blossom. So, seeing the last of the primrose buds opening, I decided to make a start removing the old raised beds. I used Amy's drill to loosen as many of the screws as possible, but the raised beds had been in position for such a long time, lots of the screws were too rusty to remove. I had to improvise using whichever tools I could find to separate the wooden sleepers. Most of the sleepers were still in good condition, so we can reuse them to make our own beds, although many of them had started to rot. Once the wood had been removed, it was time to spread out the soil from the raised beds. We didn't own our own spades or forks yet, so I had to use a rake to pull the soil from the old beds. I used the rake to spread the soil roughly evenly around the garden. The very next day, a work colleague of mine who has also moved home recently was getting rid of some old gardening tools. She offered them to Amy and I. They included 2 garden spades and a garden fork. These tools would have been really helpful yesterday when I was spreading soil around the garden. Nonetheless, I was able to put them to good use straight away to remove some of the old plants that we no longer needed. Once the plants had been dug out, I removed some of the old paving slabs and relaid them to make a straight edge to the patio. The edge of the patio will be the start of the first vegetable bed, and I'm going to use the edge of the patio as a temporary guide to getting the first sleeper in. It feels so amazing to have our own garden. It's something that Amy and I have both wanted for a really long time. And to be able to make long-term plans for our own growing space is something that neither of us have been able to do before. As the evening came and the sun began to set, I sat and watched the starlings nesting in the eaves of our new home and felt especially grateful that we were able to move somewhere so rural. Apart from the sound of the occasional plane passing by overhead, I only really noticed the sound of the birds singing, as you can probably hear now, and that's really grounding. I think we're both really pleased to be in our new home.